In this short interview, we want to explore some of the differences between studying psychology at AS and moving to study psychology at A2, because as teachers we feel that it is quite a big transition, and for you people in Year 12 we've got some experts here today with us to give us their views on that transition from AS to A2. So I'd like to introduce Emmy and James. Okay, what have you enjoyed about psychology in the upper six? If anything.
Probably as much as independent learning, but group work as well, as I find it sticks better in your head if you work in teams with people.
Right.
But I don't think always working with your friends is the best idea.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I'd probably say the same. You get to do quite a lot of independent research by yourself, which I've quite enjoyed doing because it helps me get a better understanding of different sections I may struggle with. Like obviously we get all the packs and stuff, but doing this extra research by myself has helped me to understand things in a better light.
Right. Yeah, good. And are there any topic areas that you particularly enjoyed?
I'd probably say I quite enjoyed the aggression section,
Right.
just because it's something that has interested me for quite a while, because it's something that I would quite like to look at in the future after university.
Right.
Yeah, I thought schizophrenia was quite interesting to look into, as it is a real disorder that affects a lot of people,
Right.
as well as addiction. Addiction, whether it's mild or much at a major scale, anyone can be affected by addiction.
Right. Okay, thank you. Okay, and what advice would you give to people who are going into the upper six? Perhaps if you think about any resitting advice?
Definitely reset an AS module if you've got a lower score than you expected, because once you learn the techniques for A2, when you go back to the AS exams, it's much easier the second time round when you look at it. Especially when the questions go from 3 24 markers at A2 back down to 4, 6 and 12 markers. It's much easier to get a grasp of.
Yeah, I would say the same. On Unit 1, I didn't get the best score that I could have. Managed to resit it and I've pushed my mark up, so I'm now sitting on a good B, so I think resitting's definitely a good choice to do.
Okay, thank you. Any advice about writing essays? Big question, really.
Remember to include a synoptic point, but make sure you definitely get all the homeworks done, as they're all set as 24 markers as homeworks, which saves you revising later on, as it's more, when you go back to revision, it's more refreshing your memory instead of having to think, I've got to teach it myself again. Especially if you got a good mark on your homework as well, you think, oh yeah, I remember writing this out 2 months ago. It's just refreshing in your memory.
Yeah, definitely get all the homeworks done, because otherwise you're going to be behind, and it's a lot harder to catch up on something that you may not have the best knowledge on. And obviously at our point we're not in school as often, so we've not got constant contact with teachers. So if you're stuck on something, you can't always get it done straight away unless you've done the homework in the past.
And how long were you spending on psychology homeworks a week?
For about an hour, maybe longer. Probably 45 minutes or so on each side. Longer than it would take to write an exam, but that's because you have to go through it all again and try and write out a detailed answer to try and get the highest mark on your homework, so that when you come back to revise it, you know what's the right thing to write.
And are there any differences in the sort of exam structure at A2?
Obviously at A2,
yeah,
Yes,
it's massive. It changes from lots of smaller questions in your 12 mark, which is at the time is scary, but to 3 24 markers, which is obviously very difficult to write out compared to
the more
lots of little
practice you
questions.
get at doing
the more essay practice you get and learn the writing technique, the easier it is in the exam. Even if you have a gap in your knowledge, if you know how to write the answer, you get much more marks.
Thank you.
In trying.
Do you think it's important to conduct independent research, your own research for things?
In my case, yeah. Because I found it helped me out a lot, just due to, obviously, as I said before, if I've not got the best knowledge on a certain aspect, it has helped me to understand it a bit more. And also there's always new research coming out about certain subjects that if you learn and someone else hasn't learned, you can put that in your essay, and that could possibly even get you more marks at the end of the day.
I haven't really done much independent research myself, but I guess it would help if you know more about topics, especially if you research yourself. It more sticks in your brain if you take the time out to look at it yourself instead of just being almost like rambled to or spoken to. So that you don't take that in, but if you're researching yourself, you do take more of it in.
Have you made use of Psychology Review that's in the library for free?
I've looked at it a few times and taken a few of the research out of that.
Right, yeah. Okay, because you can photocopy that,
Yeah.
can't you? Yeah, yeah. What's the breakdown of evaluation? At AS it was 50-50.
Now it's 1/3 marks for description and 2/3 evaluation. So it's the emphasis is more on evaluation for questions. So it's not the end of the world if you don't know the description, but it is quite big if you don't know 16 of the 24 marks for evaluation. And the evaluation has to be contextualised more at A2.
Oh, that's a big word. What does that mean?
Well, if it's generic evaluation, it doesn't really get marks, but if you apply it directly to the topic, like directly to schizophrenia, or you mention the word schizophrenia and show the link between the two of how it's a positive or a disadvantage, they're more likely to see if he knows what he's on about than if you just write a downside of drug treatment that is for all drug treatment, not just contextualised to schizophrenia.
Great, thank you. Any particular advice about exam preparation?
Revise, definitely.
The earlier you start revising, the easier it is when it gets close to the exam. Because last minute revision for psychology, there's so much content, it's very difficult to cram everything in your head in one go.
Right.
But if you start, even if you like 10-15 minutes a day, the longer you start revising for before, the easier it is. As you've done it so many times, by the time you get to it, you think it'll almost come naturally.
And when you are revising, what are you doing?
Well, everyone has their own way of revision. My way particularly is doing like PowerPoints, just because I'm a more visual learner than I am just sitting there reading out the book.
Right.
And stuff. I like to record myself as well, talking the book out and listening to it while I'm doing certain things like running, doing sport and stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm completely opposite.
Right.
I find it easy to revise, just reading it and rewriting it out and just to get stuck in my head.
But both of you doing something actively with it, aren't you?
Yeah.
Not just reading it.
No, you have to you actually have to actively do something, otherwise it doesn't get stuck in your head. You have to actually physically write it down again so that you're thinking of it, or like you had, if the recordings go around your head. When it comes to the exam, you'll think, you won't think of what was in your pack, you'll think to the way you've revised it, and you'll think, oh, I remember writing that down, or I remember saying that, or when I was running along this point, I remember I was talking to myself about whatever.
Okay, and both of you are wanting to go on to university?
Yep.
Yeah.
Guaranteed at university now you'll have to do presentations, as part of your assignments, regardless of your subject, Any advice for making presentations?
Make it as detailed as you can. Because the more detail you put in at a later date, like obviously at the stage we're at doing Unit 3, we've done PowerPoints for different sections. The more detail you put in, even though it's not yours, it could help someone else in the class who may be struggling with that, so they can write it down and use that in their exam at the end of the day.
Yeah, especially if you're presenting your presentation to the class. I think it's easy if you can learn it yourself, where you don't need to look at the presentation, or you only have a few key like buzzword type things. If you can teach it to someone else without having to look, it shows that you know the topic yourself. So if you can teach it to someone else, it sort of proves to yourself that you do know what you're talking about, and it's easy in the exam.
I agree, that's good. And any other bits of advice, final pieces of advice?
I haven't spoken about.
Well, one thing I've always found that after a lesson, if you struggled with something, look back over it, because then it'll stick. And then if you start adding, especially with sometimes what I do, I teach it to someone else, which helps me remember it. So I can just talk to my sister or my mum, and they can ask me questions and I can answer them quite well.
Yeah, if you don't understand something, definitely go back to a teacher as well. But sometimes people feel embarrassed or hostile to say, not hostile, but embarrassed to say things in class as they think they're the only one that doesn't understand. But I suppose going back to a teacher is probably just as helpful as they can re-explain or teach it in a different way that helps you.
Okay, that's lovely, thank you. Right. Bing.